And we're live.
Here we are, back again. Welcome to the Business Velocity through the 5 Facets of Business podcast. We're your hosts, Dave Newell, Hannah Panuski. With our guests, we explore actionable insights and share stories of real businesses, real leaders doing real things. Whether you're a startup or a seasoned business leader, understanding how to harness the 5 facets of your business will help you propel your growth to achieve business velocity. I'm excited about today's guest. Hannah, I know you're going to introduce it, but this guest is actually the reason you and I know each other and
Correct.
how we ended up getting connected in the first place. So absolute debt of gratitude. Hannah, who are we talking to today?
Yeah, so we are talking to, someone that I've known for a long time, someone you've known for a long time, and the person that brought us together, Will Christensen. Will Christensen is a passionate advocate for efficiency and effectiveness in business operations. Anytime I think of automation, I think of Will. He is a champion for his phrase, automate, delegate, eliminate. That philosophy. He's also known for his innovative 15115 method, which we'll talk about. A strategic approach that guides business owners on what to automate, delegate, and eliminate to streamline their operations and boost productivity. And he is the founder of the Entrepreneur's Apprentice program, which we will definitely also talk about. He specializes in helping new entrepreneurs clone themselves by automating, delegating, and eliminating. He has a podcast under the same name. So he's old hack at this. He knows how this goes. Let's bring him in.
Let's do it. Oops.
Howdy.
Hello.
Hey, Will, welcome. Thanks for jumping in.
Hey, I'm super excited to be here. The only thing my bio doesn't mention that I probably need to toss in there is that we founded the very first automation agency that they call them digital operations now, and they're a dime a dozen, people who focus on Zapier and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you look online now, there are hundreds of them. In 2017, we were the first one that I don't actually know of anybody else who had started an operations focused, we're going to automate your stuff for you using things like Zapier. We became the first Zapier certified expert. I'm the first Zapier certified expert to meet Wade Foster in person, who's the founder of Zapier. I actually went to like a Zapier conference. I was like unofficially invited and they were like, no, come on in, and like asked me tons of questions. And I feel like I was in a fishbowl and it was so cool. And then we were also the very first company. So Zapier certified expert plus Zapier app developer. We were the very first company to do that.
Nice.
And so data automation then sprung forward and our pathways have shifted and stuff. And Sierra is now the CEO there and they're still doing their thing, chugging along. Tamsin and Neil are kicking trash over there. So
Nice.
That's how it all started. And the transition of things moving around back in 2021 was where Hannah had some amazing opportunities and dove in headfirst with Dave, and Dave was all involved with data automation as well. So anyway, that's a key part of our history here is data automation. So love that.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I learned so much from my time with you guys, and it was so much fun to be surrounded by such big brains, honestly, and like thinking about how, the internet truly runs. I mean, you actually sat us down and were like, do you know how the internet works? And like taught us about GET requests. And like, it was fun. And it really did open my brain to so many things that now I use all the time. Zapier, automation, process enhancement, everything. So
yeah,
there are people. So it's funny that you say that because Erica Satterfield, who was a project manager for us, she's now one of the. I think she just got a promotion over at Zapier.
Oh, great!
And she's been with Zapier for a while now.
Great.
She messaged me. She said, "Thank you so much for challenging me on being technical." She was like, "I was like, you were like." APIs, and I was like, what? And she just, I remember her being so not interested in going super technical, and I was like, no, you got this. And I compared some of her past experience in some of her sales roles and stuff, and I just remember challenging her, and she thanked me for it later. 5 years later, she was like, I never would have believed that I could have done some of these more technical things. And so I love what you mentioned about like the way the web works. I'm actually gonna have to go back and find some of those old trainings, because for people at data automation, understanding how a web page loaded was like a key part of the process, because every time you load a web page, you're interacting with an API. Or actually hundreds of APIs. And so if people are like, oh, I don't have any experience with that. Yeah, you do.
Absolutely. And I do think, if our listeners are needing or interested in some automation services, definitely check out Data Automation. I do want to talk about automation first, but I do want to get to Entrepreneur's Apprentice. So I'll start with kind of a straightforward question, but because we know that a lot of our listeners are small business owners or managers, walk us into what is automation and what does that look like for a small business?
Yeah, so automation is one of those interesting. Right now, it's like the old hat buzzword. AI is the new big hat buzzword. If you look at what Zapier's done, their like tagline right now is automate as fast as you can type. And basically they've built a chat bot essentially that you can type into and say, I want to make it so that every time I get an email from this person, make it so that it automatically saves the file in Dropbox. And it will build the guts of what you're trying to build there automatically. I love that word, automatically. And automation, I remember at the very beginning jumping on phone calls with people and they were like, you can do that? And what's fascinating to me is even with AI now, people are still saying that same thing. And I think what AI has done is it's made it mainstream. If you talk to small business owners in 2017, general run of the mill, are you using automation today? The answer in general would have been like, not really, kind of, sometimes. What's automation? You can do that? Well, now if you were to go around and say, are you using AI today? Their answer is usually, I should be. Or I try to. Or yes, because they don't want to look like someone who's being left behind. And so what AI has done is more as a people movement, like more of like the general, like my grandma knows what AI is, right? Like COVID forced my grandma onto the internet, and COVID forced my grandparents to learn how to jump on a Zoom call and figure out a lot of that stuff. Well, then the introduction of AI on top of that, now we have like a society that understands what computers can do for us. And so we're in the like I see this, a lot of people have compared it to like the Industrial Revolution. I think it's the AI and automation revolution where businesses are, I mean, talk about a great time to buy businesses where the boomers are going in and retiring, and their businesses have nothing in them that's AI or automation related, and you can go in and just add that and it starts pumping out 20 to 30% more. So like there's just so much going on right now. So for a small business, automation means taking the things that you shouldn't be doing manually and automating them.
Well, so let me ask that very question, right? Because I think as somebody who's not as technically proficient, right? Like I use AI, we use AI, like we use ChatGPT regularly, right? Like we've figured some of those things out, but like every software that we use has some like try our AI thing. And it feels actually kind of clunky, and it feels a little bit like it's actually harder for me to use this than it is for me not to use it. Like I haven't found the AI source from that's been like integrated into software. Like we use ClickUp and they've got an AI thing, and I've tried it a few times and I'm like, I don't really get it. Like, how are you going to write the task that I have in my head? Like, I don't understand how that works. Right. So, maybe kind of two prongs to a question here. One is, so how do I know like what I should be automating? Right. Like, how do I just determine what do I automate? Because I think most folks would say, oh, I'd love to automate X. Like, I'd love to automate payroll. And you're like, okay, well, is that even a thing? I don't know. Right. But so how do we determine what to do? And then also, how do you get people around that automation to use the automation? How do you get that kind of adoption buy-in to it, either internally or externally, depending upon what you're automating?
Got it.
That was loaded, Will.
Hey,
Sorry.
I those are two loaded questions that I've answered hundreds of times. So
Okay, great. We're good.
I've got very succinct, solid answers. I shouldn't say the word succinct because I'm really good at pontificating. But the short answer to that is you should use my framework 15115 to identify things. So get out a sticky note. Like if you're watching this right now, stop, get out a sticky note, get out a piece of paper, and write down 15115 at the top of that sticky note. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write down tasks that took you more than 15 minutes a day, more than an hour a week, or more than an hour a month, and you're going to do them 5 times. So before I ever even start writing down a process, I ask myself, is this going to happen again? Okay, yeah, it's going to happen again. How long before it happens again? Well, this is something I'm going to do daily. Well, if it's a daily thing, it only needs to take 15 minutes, and it's in the process of one of 3 things. If you're choosing to do this in the future forever, like that's kind of what your brain's telling you, like, no, this is going to happen forever. If it's more than 15 minutes a day, that's more than an hour a week and more than an hour a month. In that situation, there's enough budget behind what you should be paying yourself or considering that you're paying yourself that you should be considering either automating, delegating, or full-blown eliminating that task. I, for one, have an issue coming out clean on this podcast right now. I tend to want to do everything. Hannah can tell you when she was first my assistant and then rose to be the general manager over at Data Automation, one of her jobs was to pull the reins back. And Dave, actually, he was the fractional COO. Pull the reins. No, Will, should we? I know we can, but should we? Think Jurassic Park, right? So 15115 was meant to be a receptacle of things that we should or should not do. And you make the decision after you've done them 5 times. So that's where the last 5 comes from. 15115. So you write down the task, you say, you put a little W because it's weekly, and then you put a little dash and you start doing tally marks till you get to 5. And when you get to 5, you need to decide whether or not you're going to automate, delegate, or eliminate. Because at that point, you're going to say, I've done this for a week now for 50 minutes a day, and it is actually making impact on the business. So we're not going to eliminate it. So we either need to automate, delegate, or put it into my schedule in a way that it actually works, right? So sometimes you do have to do it yourself. But that's really the crux of how you identify what you should be automating, delegating, or eliminating.
It's great.
I love that. If I may add another thing to that, only because this was always part of just the thing that we talked about too, in all of our time working together, and something that I have to constantly remind myself of. You need to do it manually 5 times in order to understand how to automate it. And I come across a lot of clients who want to jump to the automation point. They're like,
It's
oh, well,
sexy.
we do this thing over and over again. Let's automate it. I'm like, well, have you actually written down the process? And have you even done the process yet? Because, we also work with a lot of startups. There's a lot of new and exciting processes that they want to try or even ways of structuring your week, things like that. And they want to jump into automating some part of it. But you have to do it manually. You have to understand what it's like to touch the thing, be in the thing, and see the steps play out in order to make it quick and to make it automatic.
Totally.
Happen.
Hearing you say that word, you have to do it 5 times manually, just gives me chills, because I remember on calls with people and telling people it's got to be done 5 times manually. If you don't know where the if thens are going to be inside your process. So that actually lines up really well with Dave's statement of, well, how do I get these guys to actually adopt new automation, new process, some of those other things? What you mentioned earlier about standard operating procedures. So since this is all about actionable insights, I'm going to try and leave as many of these nuggets as possible so that everybody who's listening is like, oh my gosh, where else is that guy talking? So here's the actionable insight number 2 I would give about standard operating procedures. A hack for creating a standard operating procedure is the camcorder method. That's where if you were to put a camcorder behind you and record, here's exactly what I'm doing, so that they can see what's happening on the screen. Loom is probably my favorite tool to use for this. If you do not have a Loom subscription, like I haven't found anything better. Loom, like by far outdoes the competition. It's very, very easy for its price. Its AI features actually work.
Yeah, 100%. They totally do.
Oh, their AI features are awesome. They title
we are not supported or associated with Loom in any way. We just really love it.
Yeah, it's not an active sponsorship, but it could be.
It could be a sponsorship if Loom
all of us love it.
If anyone from Loom is listening to this, we would be interested. All of us. I've got a podcast. They've got a podcast. We love you.
Yeah. I mean, I use it with clients. I use it internally. Hannah does it, but also to your point, like if we're documenting a process, just turn on Loom, watch yourself, just talk what you're doing. You're doing the process anyways.
Yep.
Like you're not adding labor, you're not adding time of when am I going to document the process.
You're just talking out loud. I'm talking to myself, pretending that there's someone else in the room who's gonna do this for me in the future. Even if there's not somebody who's gonna do it for you in the future, the hack is this: take that transcript, go over to ChatGPT-4 or Claude or whatever you want to use, paste it in there and say, write me an SOP for the process I just documented. And that thing will spit out a really solid bones starting place for you to look at that. And then ask, is this automatable? Right? Like there are amazing things that can be done just on the iterative thinking about processes and some of those different pieces of what's there. Like another thing I would say is ask it, okay, who's the world's foremost process expert that you know? And it'll spit out 3 or 4 people. Okay, tell them about my business does this, this, or this. Which one of those experts would be the best one to look at my business? Spit out that one. Okay, now pretend you are that person. Look back at that SOP. How could I make it better? Like you'll be shocked with the results that if you narrow the scope and kind of massage AI into that world, really cool stuff comes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I am curious your answer to this question, and then I do want to talk about Entrepreneur's Apprentice here in a second. Is there anything that, I mean, I'm sure there are, but what have you seen? What instances have you seen where people should not automate?
Oh my gosh. There are so many instances. Well, so one of my favorite places where people kind of mess up early in the automation process is billing. When you're in the billing process, you can automate a lot of the billing. But if you automate a lot of the billing, you have got to have a bunch of checks and balances, manual checks and balances, where your team is double checking it. Like I've automated my entire billing process. Hannah can tell you that before we automated the billing process, it was really bad. We started using this system called Practice Ignition that allowed us to sign contracts and then have them just flow automatic ACH. That worked great until the customer sent an email and said, hey, I need to cancel. And I said, oh, okay, no problem. We'll cancel. And then I forgot to forward that to Hannah or forward that to whoever to go in and actually cancel, or they forgot to go in and cancel. And then that ACH comes out and you've got to go refund them. And it just gets ugly really fast. The cost of refunding and all of that has been worth it for me to automate that specific part of the business. But it's very important that you are very upfront about exactly why it's being automated, how it's being automated, what the process is. Like sometimes I'll tell people, hey, and just a heads up, because this is automated, if you do see a charge come through, just forward us the invoice. We'll refund you immediately. If you see, like if you've canceled and it somehow gets stuck in our system, i.e. someone forgot to cancel it, we'll take care of that. So billing, sending invoices, sending contracts, all of that sort of stuff, it's so sensitive to the like relationship process. Yeah. Be careful with that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I love that you said that, in part because there is kind of the human dynamic and human element. I mean, one of the things I think about with automation is even almost just like forecasting forward, right? To say like, okay, so if I was receiving this automation, like what are some of the things that would be potential pitfalls, or what might be some potential things that come back to bite us if we're not paying attention to this thing on a regular basis. And sometimes it is like, well, then the message is going to go out and somebody might get frustrated with us because an invoice went out, even though they said, hey, we're not going to do this thing anymore. And now they're mad at us, as opposed to we had an amicable end. Like
Yep.
we've created a dynamic.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it is like, let's put some stopgaps. Let's mitigate the potential downside of an automation. And at the same time, like, I think, to your point, I want to kind of pull this back, because I think it's actually a way for us to get into Entrepreneur's Apprentice. But pulling something forward that you said, right, of like, you're an entrepreneur, like you're by your nature, you are an entrepreneur. I've known you for a long time at this point. It's just kind of who you are, right? It's how you operate. You also mentioned that you have this like, and I want to get into things, like I want to own stuff, I want to push stuff. And I'm like, those two things are not mutually exclusive at all. Pretty much every entrepreneur I know has some variation of like, yeah, but I want to like build and touch and make it happen and drive it and all of those things.
Yep.
Right. But inherently that's not scalable.
Yep.
So I do find this like disconnect or discord between, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to build things, and in order to actually build something that functions, you have to automate and get yourself out of it, right? Like that's the only way to scale something, is to stop trying to scale yourself.
Yep.
So a really good question we've been asked recently is, are you building a job or are you building a business? I'm like, great question. A little bit painful, if I'm being honest in my own answer. I'm like, because definitely I'm building a job today, but I really hope to be building a business here and here and here, right? And I think it's just a good question to sit with if we think about, should we automate this or not? Like, is this something I can give away? Is this something I can delegate, automate, or eliminate? And I think it also speaks to kind of what you're talking about with Entrepreneur's Apprentice, right? Like, you've been talking about like, how do we clone entrepreneurs, right?
Yep.
Because I think part of the fear of letting go of things in your organization is you think, well, nobody else can do this. Like, who else in the company can do what I can do?
Yep.
Right. And like, that's a legitimate question. That's not as narcissistic as that comes across. It's not. It's a legitimate, thoughtful, fearful question. Right. So how do you clone entrepreneurs?
So so this is such a fundamental part of who my journey and where I've gone. Data automation was all about automation. Surprise, that's what we called it, right? Data automation. And I focused so much there. And I actually hired Dave to come in and help me learn to delegate better. I hired Hannah to help me learn to let go of some things so that I could actually grow in this way. And in the end, the reason we had the transition, and I'll even say implosion there a little bit in the middle of 2021, was because I had not yet learned to let go. And what I didn't realize, and it took COVID and some catastrophic events. My grandmother fell down the stairs and we ended up having to take her to the hospital. And I mean, it was a crazy, crazy time. That event, added to several others, created some PTSD in me that I didn't even know I had. And then some deep, dark depression. And the reason I go here in this, to answer your question, Dave, is it wasn't until I was that like stuck in my stuff that I was willing to actually look at it. A nurse practitioner showed up at my house. She gave me a little quiz, and the quiz came back as severely depressed. She said, "You're severely depressed based on this quiz." You know, those quizzes that like often, sometimes maybe.
Yeah.
I was like, "What?" And my wife was like, "I have been telling you this for years. like you need to look at this." And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to go get some help. And I realized that my issue with letting go of people, my issue of people leaving the company, my issue of holding on too tightly, my issue of how I was interacting with the team was very much so based in trauma. I lost my mom when I was 10 years old from breast cancer. And so you can imagine, this is, by the way, her mother who fell down the stairs. And so like reliving that event in my mind over and over again, and all of that was going on forced me to look inside. And after I got through that PTSD, I was like, no, I'm not stopping. We're going to continue with this therapy thing. And I continued to do EMDR, and I have come to a totally new place of being. And in many ways, I wish I could go back and rewrite my story in the delegation sense. So if you're having a hard time letting go, and you see that you're really like there's something really tight on that, maybe go look at that with a therapist. Maybe go look at that with a business coach. And don't try to do it yourself. That's I tried myself for years. I read multiple books. It wasn't until I shifted what was deep inside me that I was willing to really begin to let go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so part of that letting go is trusting someone else to do the vital function the vital functions in your organization, and really help and support you in an independent way. And so, so speaking about these entrepreneurs and these apprentices, if someone's listening who's very interested in getting into entrepreneurship and maybe wants to participate in the program, but honestly just wants to get into it in general, maybe has no money and very little resources, how would you suggest they get into entrepreneurship in general? And then maybe how could they also access the program?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the course of even like when I was deep in the middle of data automation, I was looking for a way to clone myself. I was looking for a way to figure out how to connect those processes, how to find somebody who could come in and be my partner in what we were working on and care about it as much as me. And that was a terribly difficult thing to do. I had VA after VA that were coming in, and this was before Hannah joined the team. And I would give them a task and they just didn't seem to care enough about what was going on to try to figure it out. And so we, shifted around, and I eventually found Hannah, and we dug in, and I'd give her a task, and she actually did care, and we actually did lean into that. And so I started to see some of the attributes and different ways that we could go about that. And I built a process by which I could vet out young, hungry entrepreneurs, individuals who wanted to be entrepreneurs for their rest of their lives, who needed help. And that made me realize, wait a second, like I have a time machine here where I can go grab a copy of me in the past, pull him forward, and we can just nail this. I discovered something earth-shattering. My first several apprentices were just like me, and they lasted 3 months. And then they got squirreled away, and they wanted to go work on something else. And I was like, gosh, dang it, this is not working. I had a guy, his name's Josh Topham. He came to me and said, well, I'll work for free. I want this job that bad. And I was like, I can't beat free. Let's work on. So I had several ideas. I was like, yeah, let's work on these ideas. He was so consistent and just with me. I was like, wait a second. So one of my apprentices that was just like me failed. I put Josh into that role, and he was consistent and chugged along and got things figured out. I was like, wait a second, Josh is my opposite. I don't need a clone. I need a clone who has my weaknesses as strengths. I need my opposite. So at Entrepreneur's Apprentice, what we do is matchmake entrepreneurs with young entrepreneurs who are their opposite, and we help them identify that process. So if you're a young entrepreneur and you want to get into this, equityhammer.com/apprentice. Go apply for that program. And we vet you and help you get in and connected with an entrepreneur, someone like Dave or Hannah, who has been doing this for a while and is successful and is needing help scaling. And if you're an entrepreneur who's totally overwhelmed, that's the other piece of it, is we go in and help from that standpoint. So if you were going to do that on your own, number one thing I would say is build a form for people who are applying to join you. Don't just, resumes are very difficult. Build a form.
Yeah, we'll put the Equity Hammer website in the show notes so people can click on that and follow it and go find it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so Will, as always, appreciate the candor, right, around, doing the work, talking about doing the work on yourself, right? So appreciate you sharing that. My wife as a therapist does EMDR work. Like I can attest to the stories and the power of it. And it's not just for it's not just, I think sometimes there's a stigma around it, and it's not just that stigma. It's like everybody actually benefits from this opportunity to kind of process, look internal, deal with the past. And I think as entrepreneurs, we're almost always so future focused, right? What's next? What's coming? Where are we going? That sometimes we don't look backwards and say, yeah, but kind of what's this thing that we're carrying with us that's keeping us from accessing the future that we want to access, right? So I appreciate you kind of calling that out, calling that important workout. And I think, there's, the business coaches, et cetera. Like one of the things we just often see is there's these patterns, there's these behaviors that we don't even recognize, right? And one of the things we talk about is leadership as a choice. What we mean by that is, like, if you're not getting to insight, if you're not learning new things about yourself, if you're not advancing that self-awareness or even awareness of your business, you get stuck in the status quo. You get stuck in that pattern, that thing that you've done over and over and over again. And what choice comes from is insight. Now I can see something differently, right? So the anecdote we like to use with this came from a David Foster Wallace graduation speech some odd years ago. And he says, it's the fish story, right? So there's this old fish swimming in the water, swims by two younger fish and says, hey boys, how's the water? And the two younger fish are like, water? What the hell is water? Right? It's like, it's this thing that they've been swimming in, and they didn't realize that they were like, they knew it, they touched it, tasted it, could feel it, but they didn't know what it was, right? It's like, well, just now that you know that it's called water, you have this insight, you can do something with it. You can access it differently. You can see it differently. You can interact with it differently. And I think much in the same way, like having an apprentice or having somebody who's learning from you, who's seeing you, actually operates a little bit, and who's different than you, operates a little bit like a mirror.
Yep. Oh, it totally, not a little bit.
Yeah, a lot bit like a mirror, right? Of like, well, okay, so you're showing me that, oh man, I'm actually super inconsistent when I talk about this thing, or my messaging is all over the place because you're super confused. I thought I was speaking really clearly. Clearly, that's not the case, right?
So many times where I've been like, this is the way we do it. And then I'll get on the phone and do it again. And it's like, this is the way we do it. And they're like, excuse me, the last time you did it, you did this instead of that. And
Exactly. So, I mean, I'd love to just hear from you, kind of what have you seen as gains for people being, hosts and stewards and guides to apprentices, and kind of, why would you recommend it?
I think the biggest thing that I've found, so if you're a solopreneur or a company that's under 20, and I've seen the apprentices work for companies that have larger groups, generally like a department head that brings on an apprentice to, where they would have brought on a VA. If you've brought on VAs before and the VA didn't work out, and you really wish you could figure out how to make a VA work out, this is your program. Like, we actually build in a lot of coaching, and I, a failed delegator, bring a lot of my expertise now to the table, because I now have like multiple direct reports and multiple people who are no longer working with me, where they come back and say, wow, you were honestly the best boss I've ever had. Like I can actually say that that's the reality now. And so the thing that I would say is, one, the coaching is massively helpful in that process. But two, having somebody who will actually rumble with you. So going Brené Brown, her book Dare to Lead, which was recommended by Lara. I can't remember Lara's last name right now. Something I can't remember.
It's been many years.
It's been many years. Lara from Satiated Artist, she recommended that to me. And Dare to Lead has been a fantastic book to push me to be more vulnerable with the people that I work with. And so an apprentice is going to be trained to push in and rumble with you. And so they're going to ask you some really hard questions on purpose. And that's meant to push us to consider what we're doing and how we should be doing it differently. And so I would say, like, if you're looking to dig in and delegate and figure out a lot of the stuff, Turn the Ship Around is another book that I would just totally recommend. It's about a guy he's a captain of a submarine. It's like the least performing submarine in the entire naval force. And he brings it up to like the top performing submarine in the naval force, which when when he describes it in the book, it's a lot more like, holy crap, he did that. I can't describe it as well as he can, but it's fascinating to watch him create a space where the people around him want to work with him, not for him.
Yeah.
And he creates some really amazing stuff there. Extreme ownership is another one that I would toss out there for, like, you as the leader have ultimate responsibility for the success or failure of the business. So when an employee makes a mistake, you own it and recognize that, hey, maybe you didn't set that employee up for success. Like, there's just so many different pieces to it that are really powerful. So if you're trying to get in there, if you're trying to understand that, Entrepreneur's Apprentice can definitely help. We coach along a lot of these different pieces, and I've got different entrepreneurs right now who are in the middle of reading some of these different books based on my recommendation, and then I'm coaching them around how to connect those different dots, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people along that journey of automate, delegate, eliminate, so they can actually scale and own a business instead of a job.
Yeah.
It's so wild. Like, I'm just sitting here having this just like deep resonance happening about how, like, I know that, like, or at least I have heard that, like, you guys got into entrepreneurship because you had an idea for a product or a service. You didn't necessarily get into it because you were like, oh, I really want to, like,
Learn to
lead people
delegate.
well and understand human psychology and, like that. I know those are byproducts of you guys being leaders, but I think that it's really fascinating. And for anybody who is listening, who is interested in getting into entrepreneurship, gird your loins, because not only are you like creating a product, but you are creating, or a service or whatever, but you are creating a leader in yourself. You are creating someone who has to be multifaceted.
And
to
if
be
you're
able to drive
not,
the
you own
processes,
a
but also
job.
drive people.
If you're not doing so sorry, got so excited I interrupted you.
I know.
Hannah was saying, like, gird up your loins because you're about to go in and need some, like, additional, like, you're gonna be a leader, because if you're not, that's a job. Like, you don't own it. So and the question I ask myself for the job versus business thing is, could this business succeed without me? Like, if I get hit by a bus, would it exist? If the answer is anywhere near no or maybe, like if you're anywhere near the hit by a bus also takes out the business, you own a job.
Yeah.
But it is worth it, and it is a wonderful journey to go on. And honestly, it's one that I have really enjoyed watching and being a part of both of you go on that, to see the evolution of both sides of the house, not only the product or service, but also yourselves and myself as a byproduct too. So I feel very lucky that life has brought all three of us together, and that we get to do this and talk about these things that
100%.
matter so much to us, and I know to other small business leaders and entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Will, is there anything we didn't ask you that you wish we would have? Any last comments, questions?
The last thing I'll throw out there is my path principle. So for automation, 15-1-1-5. But as soon as you figured out what, like, the automation part of those different things, I would recommend that you dig into the path principle. And the reason that I'm wanting you to dig into this is because path is my acronym for how to delegate. So the first part of that is the P in path, and that is process. So we talked about documenting the process. Hannah's statement of, like, make sure you write it down before you try to automate it, do it 5 times manually, understand that process. That's the P. You got to do that first. The A is assign. So you've got to give that to someone. And the assign is very interesting because you got to look inside the individuals that are in the organization and assign that to someone else. You could be assigning it to Zapier, right? I assign this task. I delegate it off my plate. The T is probably where everybody gets messed up. Trust. You have got to be vulnerable and let go, or you'll never succeed. You got to trust that Zapier is going to do its job. And if it doesn't, you're going to go in, look at the support tickets, figure out a way to shift it, fix it. If it's a VA, you got to have that vulnerable, rumbling conversation to talk about why this didn't go out. So first, define the process, then assign it to someone, trust that it's going to get done. And if all of that isn't working, you still haven't gotten it off your plate, the last step of the process, and I wish I had learned this earlier, hire. Hire. Find someone who's done it before and fork out the cash to get them to help you. Even if you don't think you can afford it. Like if you're like, oh, I've only got $10,000 to start this business and he wants $5,000. Well, if the guy's built what you've built before, you'd better spend that $5,000 on him because he knows or she knows how to build what you're trying to build. Yeah. So that's the last step, the H. And the H could be hire in the long term. They're just going to do it for you. Or the H could be hire them to automate it. Yeah. Or hire them to help you figure out what to eliminate in the business. So that's the thing I would say is path, process, assign, trust, and hire.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah, you gave us a lot of good nuggets today. Thanks for the input, the insight, and for the time as always. Wonderful to be with you. I know that the audience got a lot from you, and we will put a bunch of links and book stuff and all the things that you mentioned in the show notes. So Will, thanks so much for jumping in.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
Good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yep, amen. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks.
Well, as
we
always,
could easily sit and talk with him for so long, as we have in the past many times.
And as we probably will again in the future. Absolutely. Yeah, no, always good. One of the things I appreciate about Will is, he's got systems, tools, processes, ways of thinking about things, right? Like really tangible things like the 15115, the path, like really tangible, practical things. Well, you and I were talking about this the other day that, it's easy in entrepreneurial spaces to get caught in kind of the ethereal thoughts, right? Like, yeah, well, you should really be delegating. You should really be delegating. We're like, yeah, no, I know. I understand that I should be delegating. Like, I'm not confused about that. But what I don't get is like, how do you do it well? Right. It often comes into that real practical, like, show me the steps. How do I do this? Right. So I'm grateful that Will has some really good tools, and, having known him as long as I've known him, I can see the progression. I can see the path. Like I can see the development over time. And he's a good testament to the work that entrepreneurs put in to just get better at their craft, get better at their job, get better at leading.
Yeah, absolutely. We covered so much in this. It really was like an entrepreneur's crash course, really. Like you go from automate to delegate. And I think that I love the path principle. I mean, to your point, I think that a lot of people do wonder, like, how do I delegate it? It is so crucial to understand the process yourself first, and so that you know how to communicate it. As someone who has been delegated to for most of my career, please understand what you're asking me. Otherwise, it's going to be so much more brain load for me to even try and understand what you're even asking. Yeah. And then it takes more time and you slow it down. And so if you stop and you really study process and you understand what you're about to ask, it's going to help that delegation, and it's going to help your team member understand, what you expect out of them. But yeah, I think there's so many actionable insights in this. Please go listen to his podcast, Automate, Delegate, Eliminate. He's got lots more with great guests. And like Dave said, we'll put all the information in the show notes. This was great. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all.
For sure. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on Business Velocity. Today's insights are just the beginning of enhancing your business's momentum. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check out our framework, the 5 Facets of Business, at theevolveddifference.com. Great for entrepreneurs if you're looking for a framework in order to operate your business. And remember, the time is now to take these strategies, apply your learning, and achieve velocity. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.